Please welcome drummer, Madalene Big Bear.
Mohaupt, good morning. Thank you for being here with us. I'm really excited to be able to do this morning Madmo and this morning prayer for the Climate Assembly. I was asked to come to do the opening invocation on Monday, and at that time I had mentioned that one of my grandmother's brothers, my grandfather in our way, was Simon Pokagan, who was a great orator and delivered a speech at the same inception of the World Parliament, the Parliament of World Religions. So again, it's my pleasure to be here, and I'm going to bring some of those words forward this morning with you and share with you some insight that's very, very old now, but it's not just my words, and it still rings true to the work that we're doing here today. Just give me a moment to speak in my language real quick. Habo Shojayak, Manogish Gikinwa, Gishab Gishik and Dashnakas, Bodwa Wadmian, Down Nashna Bakwap, Kekanik and Debandagwas, Catherine Morsa and Gie, Raymond Morsa, Mishom Sabin, Madalene Augusta, Nokmus Sabin. Ngie and Danas, Nokmus Mina, Kanoma Gawan, Bodwa Wadmi Jachgawan, Dwaganik, Michiganik, and Dochbia, Nashna Bakik Ejdayan. Mishike on Dodam, Bojo and Goman, Dead Moy Maganak, Mina, Nashna Bag, we Monam Jack Chicago, Gabiash Webswat, Nui, Nashna Bam Nanak. Where these great Colombian show buildings stretch skyward, and where stands this queen city of the West, once stood red man's wigwams. Here met our old men, young men and maidens. Here blazed their council fires. But now the eagle's eye can find no trace of them. We are still here, Grandfather Pokagan. Gwi wab men nishna bam odopi. We see Indian people here today. In those days that tried our fathers' souls, an old man told his tribe, in those visions of the night he was lifted in great wonder high above the earth, where he beheld a vast spider web spread out over the land. From the Atlantic Ocean towards the setting sun, its network was made of rods of iron. Along its lines in all directions rushed monstrous great spiders, greater in strength and larger than any beast of earth, clad in brass and iron, dragging after them long rows of wigwams with families therein. Outstretching in their course the flight of birds that fled before them, hissing from their nostrils came forth fire, striking terror to both fowl and beast. Centuries have passed. The storm unsatisfied on land swept our lakes. Chugama. ZB, our streams, while the fish vanished from our waters. Our inheritance was cut off. We were driven and scattered as sheep before the human wolves. To be just, we must acknowledge there were good men within these strangers who gave their lives for us and in great kindness taught us the revealed will of the Great Spirit through his Son Jesus, the mediator between God and man. Almighty Spirit of humanity, let thy arms of compassion embrace and shield us from the charge of treachery, vindictiveness, and cruelty, and save us from further oppression. And may these Western leaders appoint no more broken down or disappointed politicians as agents to indigenous people. But may he set forth good men, tried and true, men who fear not to do right. This is our prayer. What would remain of our people without prayer? All else we leave in the hands of this republic, of this great republic. Those are the words of my grandfather, Simon Pokagan. And in the people before him, and those nations that came before him, I want to acknowledge those spirits. Miigwech memagosna na oda bemadzawen, iindan wamaganak. Miigwech Manado, Wich Kasenyak, Miigwech Manado, Wich Makok, Miigwech Manado, Wich Kashatek, Wich Bagasmok, Wich Bumsagok, Wich Nam Kangok, Wich Kachugama, Wich Nisan Jawan, Wich Kadasawan, Ina Oda Manogishki, Ina Oda Nishnabek, Migi Nishnabek, Winnebago, Menominee, Peoria, Pionkashaw, Oto, Missouri, Mascoutin, Sac and Fox, Meskwaki, Wyandotte, Wea, Miami, Shawnee, Kagabo, Ojibwe, Odawa, Bodwell, Wadmeek, How, Ilsa, and Najmoyan. Miigwech.
Please welcome the Director of Climate Action at the Parliament of the World's Religions, Emily Echevarria.
Good morning, friends, colleagues, and attendees of the 2023 Parliament of the World's Religions. We are so grateful to share this morning with you here at our Climate Action Assembly, closing off our week of dedicated focus to human rights and freedom. Today, we'll ask you to think about what you can do to promote the human right to a clean, healthy, and safe environment. We ask you to consider how you can make a difference to save our Mother Earth. We will hear first today from David Hales, trustee and chair of the Parliament's Climate Action Task Force. Previously, Hales served as president of the College of the Atlantic, chair and president of Second Nature, the managing organization of the American College and University President's Climate Commitment, and as director of the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. He also led environmental policy and sustainability programs for the U.S. Agency on International Development. As a diplomat, he has represented the United States in numerous negotiations on climate change, urban affairs, and policy and biodiversity. He served in the Carter administration as Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Interior and was the first American to serve as chair of the World Heritage Convention. Please welcome David Hales.
We began our time at this convening with the recognition that we are in a battle for the sustainability of our planet and for the souls of our children. Our treatment of this planet has reached a critical point, and we have choices to make. It is a historic turning point, and as we get close to it, we can see that it's more of a hairpin curve than it is a turning point. And if we go over the edge, we commit ourselves and we commit our children and our grandchildren and all future generations to climate disasters and social and economic disruption, which are almost impossible to describe and truly impossible to imagine. Our programs here have shown that we can make this turn if we act as our faiths guide us. Let's celebrate where we are. Let's celebrate what is happening. Let's celebrate the work that has been done. Let's celebrate the knowledge that has been generated by science about where we are and what we can do about it. Let's celebrate the wisdom of our faiths, and let's celebrate the strength of our community and our fellowship. As Casey Camp Horenick said in our first assembly, we got this. Then let's go back to work. We're not out of the fossil fuel and consumer consumption-driven thicket yet, but we can see the pathways, and we can blaze the trail for millions to follow. We have messages to send. Let's send a message to the fossil fuel industry and to the Biden administration and to COP28 that we are moving to a new economy and that oil and gas has no place in that new economy, and that exploration for oil and gas must end now. In a moment, our colleagues in the back, Jeremy, are going to put up a code, a QR code that you can all see. This is key to much of what we do from this point on. It is one way to send that message to the fossil fuel industry. Download that code, click on it, it will take you to our webpage, which has a list of actions: the Fossil Fuels Non-Proliferation Treaty, the Plastics Treaty, the Campaign for a Right to a Healthy Environment. There you go. Thank you. Put your cameras up, take a picture, you'll go there. It's an easy first step. The other steps may get a little tougher. Do you believe that all humans have a right to a healthy environment, a fundamental right to a healthy environment? Do you believe that? Scan the code. Scan the code. Get started on how we follow up from here. Do you believe that we should reform our decision processes in governments and at the UN and in all aspects of our lives so that the rights and the agency of future generations, those who are not yet alive, should be taken into account? Do you believe that? What? Couldn't hear you? Scan the code. Scan the code. You believe that we must stop turning this beautiful world into a plastic graveyard? Scan the code. Follow the directions. And do you want to know what you can personally do to combat the climate emergency? Scan the code. Clean air, clean water, productive land, healthy life. That's what this is all about. In several years, we will be gathering again in Climate Assembly. Between now and then, let's commit ourselves to action, to inspire and support one another, to celebrate our successes, to make this a better world, a world of freedom and dignity. We live on an enchanted planet in a living universe. I believe that everywhere is filled with spirit, but for me, this particular place, not this airplane hangar, but this place, this Great Lakes Basin, is special. If you look at our planet from outer space, 80% of our planet is covered with water. 3% of that is fresh. 20% of that is right there in the Great Lakes. You are 50 yards away from being able to touch the southern edge of 20% of the water in this planet. There's another basin that is special, and that's the Amazon basin, and it's endangered. And in the Amazon basin is another 20% of all the fresh water in the planet. In the Great Lakes and in the Amazon basin, 40% of the fresh water on our planet. On Wednesday night, we experienced a special insight into the Amazon today. We had guests and leaders from across the Amazon visit with us about the nature of the crisis, what can be done about it, about the successes that we can experience, and about what we can look forward to if we don't succeed. Please welcome Carlos Vicente, who is the head of the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative in Brazil, and Daiara Tukano, to give us a sense of what we talked about on Wednesday night. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. We would like to thank the Parliament of the World's Religions for the opportunity to promote the voice of each of these indigenous leaders on this stage 2 days ago. They told us about the gravity of the situation they face, in which their fundamental rights to life and the preservation of their cultures are threatened by a development model that promotes death rather than life. They have also brought us their example of struggle and resistance, which have lasted for centuries. The crisis of global climate change, pollution, and the accelerated loss of biodiversity teach us that all the violence practiced against the indigenous peoples and the nature is also violence practiced against each and every one of us, and that defending the rights of indigenous people guarantees the defense of our rights of life. As member of the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative in Brazil, Colombia, Peru, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Indonesia, we have been working hard to raise awareness, educate, and engage religious leaders, and have achieved important results in influence government actions in favor of defending the rights of indigenous peoples and preserve forests. I took part in the Amazon Summit last week, and I was able to see the power and the influence that faith community can exert on the community and on the commitment of the government in the Amazon. With the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, we offer this platform for religious leaders to engage on this matter, and we issued a strong call to action to all Amazonian government that was now echoed at the Parliament of the World's Religions. We call on all religious communities represented here to expand your efforts even further and to work even more closely with indigenous peoples, scientists, and environmental groups to influence governments and companies to promote sustainability. Religious communities can change the consumerist and selfish values that underpin the lifestyle of modern societies and that fuel the devastation of the forest and condemn indigenous peoples to indifference and extermination. Together, let's raise awareness among new leaders and members of our religious communities about climate change and the importance of the tropical forest. Let's teach about the spiritual values of caring for nature. Let's adopt environmental practices in our religious communities. Let's promote dialogue and pressures on government and companies to adopt appropriate policies and business practices. Love for all people and care for nature are the foundations of all religions and spiritualities. They are also the way to build a society of peace and dignified life for all, today and always. Now, I would like to invite to this stage the amazing indigenous leaders from Brazil, Daiara Tukano. Thank you so much.
Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. I'd like to thank a lot. I know it doesn't seem like full of people, but the people that is here willing to listen to indigenous voices are really the most important persons to us, because indigenous peoples were for too long non-listened to. And there is too little time to say, once again, that indigenous territories protect more than 82% of biodiversity in the world. We protect, as it was said before, the sources of clear water. We protect in the forest the knowledge, the memory, the history of the life that still exists in our planet. I have been to many indigenous territories under attack. We must say no to oil exploitation, gold exploitation, wood trafficking. The deforestation is growing also by the pressure of the agribusiness industry. And so we need to understand that we must divest, we must take action to protect the Amazon forest in so many ways, but especially standing side by side with indigenous peoples. Some years ago, I went to the Guarani Kaiowá territory in Brazil, and I saw a full village under attack. The sugarcane plantations put fire on the village, and the bounty killers were shooting. They gave me the responsibility to take the kids, and so just the elders remain in the village, and they keep praying. They were praying with so much love and so much faith, and I just asked, "Grandmother, grandfather, what are you praying? What is the words that you are saying in your prayer before this terrible attack?" And they just explained to me, "We are praying for the heart of the white man to be cleared of all his pain. We are praying to the heart of the farmer to be clear of all hate. We are praying so he can have good health. We are praying for his family so he can be happy and he stops attacking us." So I thank the Great Spirit, Mother Nature, the grandfather and the grandmother of the universe, for keep this wisdom of a wider love for life in each indigenous nation. And I celebrate this opportunity of union in diversity. Thank you so much to the Parliament of the World Religions. Anyu.
Ngô rai cầm te mây mơ nó ở cả dừa mây treo vua mơ nó ở cả dứa nó ba mẹ bơ này cả bên này ngô này cả bên này tam này nhà này ba mẹ ở Marwa này này cam mẹ puru coi cái nó cô ba mẹ coi cho cái cô phải đi phân coi cái nó cô.
No entanto, a urgência de proteger a Amazônia e apoiar os povos indígenas na defesa de nossas terras exige uma frente unida de forte apoio e solidariedade. É uma luta difícil e é nesse contexto que o Parlamento das Religiões do Mundo desempenha um papel fundamental. Este é um espaço em que as religiões do mundo devem se posicionar como educadoras e mobilizadoras.
Porque quando se fala de floresta, quando se fala de tirar o direito das terras dos povos indígenas, se fala de matar a Amazônia, se fala de matar o planeta. Porque nós temos ainda uma floresta viva, nós temos ainda uns guardiões vivos. Então eu gostaria que todas as religiões do mundo ficassem atentos a isso. Não só por essa Amazônia, mas por todas as florestas. Plantem a floresta, plantem a semente. No lugar de soltar bomba para matar gente, soltar bomba de semente. Desde dentro dos corações, da alma, das mentes.
También están cuidando los espíritus mayores de nuestros ancestros, los espíritus y los amos de cada planta medicinal, de cada ser vivo de los animales, como el jaguar, la boa, el duende. Ellos son los cuidadores también de la Amazonía colombiana, en este caso de la selva amazónica.
En este espacio queremos compartir la palabra, queremos dejar el mensaje de paz, de unidad y de amor hacia los diferentes pueblos del mundo. La importancia de la espiritualidad de los pueblos originarios que milenariamente hemos venido protegiendo, cuidando, luchando, los derechos de la vida, los derechos de la madre tierra.
Então convido de coração aqui a cada um de vocês essa compreensão, esse entendimento, essa aliança, esse respeito, essa consideração que todos nós somos irmãos, todos nós somos uma família só. Não importa aonde quer que nós estiver, mas todos nós somos irmãos e nós devemos respeitar o próximo. E eu convido a cada um de vocês de coração que nós possamos fazer ação e que possa ter mais respeito sobre os povos originários. Tchau.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان صدق الله العظيم. In the name of Allah, the most compassionate, most merciful. The most compassionate taught the Quran, created humanity, and taught them speech. The sun and the moon travel with precision. The stars and the trees bow down in submission. As for the sky, He raised it high and set the balance of justice, so that you do not defraud the scales, weigh the justice and do not disrupt the balance. He laid out the earth for all beings. In it are fruit, palm trees with date and stalks, and grains with husks, and aromatic plants, then which of your Lord's favors will you humans and jinn both deny? Thank you very much.
We are honored to welcome the Right Reverend Marc Andrus, PhD, the 8th Bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of California. Raised among the hills and rivers of East Tennessee, Bishop Marc developed an early love for the beauty of God's creation and heard a call to help protect it. He leads the Episcopal Church's delegation to the annual UN Climate Conference and serves as presiding Bishop Michael Bruce Curry's representative to the Anglican Communion Environmental Network. Bishop Marc's advocacy work also includes immigration reform, LGBTQ+ rights, and racial reconciliation. Please welcome to the stage Reverend Marc Andrus.
Good morning. I'd like to offer gratitude first to all that we've been given this morning as way of sustenance, the drumming, the prayers of a grandfather and the grandfather's words, the chanting from the Quran, David Hales' intelligence and passion, the prayers of the Guarani people, prayers for the conversion of people's hearts like mine. I'm deeply grateful. I know you are too. When we consider the defense of freedom and human rights in the arena of climate and environmental degradation and biodiversity loss, we are entering into a struggle that we know is of a planetary scale. And so it is right that we are hearing more and more about climate grief, about ecocide, about hospice for the earth. People speaking of paralysis, that they are overwhelmed and do not know where to go and how to turn, despite the fact that I can witness to the abundance of climate action being carried out by faith people all over the earth, and I only know a fraction of it. I do also know that those hopeful people and those who do not have hope are all feeling the enormity of the struggle. And so today, I do not call you to specific action, but I simply come to offer 3 areas of hope, of aid, of help in the struggle. For there is a way to come out of the paralysis, and it is right to feel the paralysis, to lament, because the world is so beautiful, the life of the world is so precious, that if we did not lament it, we would not be human. But we must move beyond it. So the 3 areas of help are these. We need training in nonviolence. The great civil rights and peace movements of the 20th century were all undertaken with skill by people who undertook training, who trained each other, who trained themselves. In fact, it is a strategy of those who would overcome us to have us believe otherwise, that we can just go into this struggle unprepared. You know the story of Rosa Parks, but it's worth telling. In that struggle for rights, it has often been said that Rosa Parks was simply tired at the end of the day, and that stubbornly she would not relinquish her seat on the front of the bus for a white man. This could not be further from the truth. The truth was that she and others had gone to the Highlander Center for nonviolent training for months in the mountains of Tennessee before she came back to Montgomery. And so it was that she had carefully prepared with her co-workers, even to the choice of who should sit on the bus and not stand. It didn't have to be Rosa. All of that was planned. And to think otherwise is for us to court failure. Have you ever wondered why we have arms races? We have arms races beginning in the period of the medieval between people who had short bows and those who invented long bows, and then there had to be an answer to that all the way up to this very moment. We have arms races because people figure out how to overcome the innovations of people on the other side. And I have to say that in our preparation for nonviolence, we must evolve our methods. The methods of yesterday, the great methods of yesterday, are not outworn, but they must evolve. The wonderful writer, Arundhati Roy, has said that the big dam builders and the power brokers of India have figured out that they can safely ignore hunger strikes. And they can just simply watch activists starve themselves to death with impunity. So our methods must also evolve, but we must not give in. We must not give in to being mistaken that taking on the tools of our oppressors will work instead. And that leads me to the second area of help for you and help for me, and that is our movement must be a movement of prayer. At least it is for me. The idea that we can only draw on our skills, our oratory, our organizing, our analysis, our policy making, our protest. All of those we should do, we must do, but they're not enough. That is swimming in the shallow part of the ocean. Instead, we must resort to the divine, who is always, always available to help us. In the Psalms, it says, some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of God. They are brought to their knees and fall, but we rise up and stand firm. Or closer to our own time, Audre Lorde wrote, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. We must resort to overflowing love, divine love that motivates, creates, and sustains the universe, and never consider another person our enemy. There are many ways to pray, probably as many ways to pray as there are peoples of the earth. But here is what Thich Nhat Hanh taught me. It only takes a fraction of a moment to turn to the ultimate, and the ultimate will be there. Or as it says in my scriptures, not a sparrow falls to the earth apart from God. God is with you and with me and with all of life on earth, and it is for me to turn to God for the help that I need. And finally, we are being helped by the luminous beings of love who have come before us. In Christianity, they are called saints. In Buddhism, they are called the bodhisattvas. But across the world, people have experienced, not just believed, but experienced that people of extraordinary love never give up their love for the world. They continue to stay connected to you in your struggle for justice and for peace and for the increase of love. The great Quaker, current day, anti-nuclear peace activist David Hartsaw told me this story. Just a few years after Martin Luther King was assassinated, David was in Switzerland, and he was feeling despondent in the face of the struggle. He sat on a bench facing into the Alps, looking at the beautiful mountains, the flowers, the grasses, seeking some peace, seeking some strength. And suddenly, he felt a hand on his shoulder and a voice that he knew was Martin's. And it said, "David, I know that you are struggling, and it seems that you cannot go on. But I promise you, I will always be with you." In 2014, the great venerable Zen Buddhist master Thich Nhat Hanh said this just a few months before the massive stroke that robbed him of speech and of motion, but not of activity. He said, "The day that Martin Luther King was assassinated, I was devastated. I could not eat, I could not sleep, and I made a deep vow to continue what Martin called the beloved community. And I believe I have kept that vow to this day, and I have always felt his support." I asked myself many questions about what Thai said in that statement, but prominent among them was the question, what did he mean? I have always felt his support. It could be that he read the works of Dr. King and was inspired again by them, or he recalled to memory the times they corresponded and the times they met, and that helped him. All that, I believe, is true. But by carefully researching it, I came to believe he meant more than that. He meant that non-corporally, beyond a body, that Martin's love continued to bind him to the struggle for justice and for peace. And that Thich Nhat Hanh himself, an embodiment, an avatar of love, could see that and could feel that. Those great luminous beings trail behind you and indeed encircle and envelop the earth. Desjardins called it the noosphere, a glowing sphere of love that covers the earth and is ready to help you and to help me. Just before we gathered this morning, a person I admire a great deal, Karenna, Gore, and I were talking. You're going to hear from her in a moment. And she said that a Dominican nun told her years ago that Catherine of Siena, Teresa of Avila, all these people, they're here, ready to help us, but we need to organize them. I love that. Ask for their help. Pray to God. Get nonviolent training. We shall overcome.
We are honored to now welcome to the stage Karenna Gore. She is the founder and executive director of the Center for Earth Ethics and visiting professor of the practice of earth ethics at Union Theological Seminary in New York. Karenna formed the Center for Earth Ethics in 2015 to address the moral and spiritual dimensions of the climate crisis. Working at the intersection of faith, ethics, and ecology, she guides the center's public programs, educational initiatives, and movement building. She is also an ex officio faculty member of Columbia University's Earth Institute and a member of the Climate Action Task Force of the Parliament of the World's Religions. Please welcome to the stage Karenna Gore.
Thank you. It is an honor to be here alongside such distinguished speakers in this climate plenary session. And it is moving to be here in Chicago, the site of the first convening of the Parliament of the World's Religions in 1893, as part of the world's Columbian Exposition of that year. We would not be so quick to celebrate the anniversary of Columbus today, understanding the genocidal consequences of his arrival. And indeed, we want to be clear and admit that one type of religion undergirded that colonial encounter every step of the way. Thanks to the voices of indigenous peoples, an awareness of the error of that thought system has broken through. That thought system of domination over nature and dehumanization of whole peoples. It has broken through even in the very faith institutions that promulgated it in the first place. And thank you, Madalene Big Bear, for your powerful words of blessing and the presence of your ancestors, your message that opened this session this morning. These dialogues matter. We all have a great deal to learn from each other. Defending freedom and human rights is the theme of this year's convening, and we are grateful to earlier generations of interfaith leaders for all that they did to help bring the legal architecture that protects human rights at home and around the world. In particular, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a document created with extensive contributions from interfaith leaders. It was adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1948. While the UN is far from a perfect organization, it remains our last best hope in many ways. It offers a platform to call out the authoritarian leaders who ignore human rights. And it is the principal forum for our ongoing struggle to stop the course of man-made climate change. We must all make it known to our political leaders that we are paying attention to that work, including at COP28 in Dubai in December. In our time, more and more are recognizing a core truth. The right to live in a healthy environment is a human right. Congratulations to all those organizations, including the Parliament, who successfully advocated for the UN General Assembly to recognize this right last fall. It is a right that we have seen in the news again this past week with the story of young people in Montana winning in a case in which the court ruled in their favor and against fossil fuel interests, upholding their right to live in a healthy environment as articulated in their state constitution. And it is a right that we will be hearing a lot more about in the years to come. Just as religious leaders rose to the challenge of building a better world with human rights in 1948, so we need your influence and insights to articulate and defend the human right to the environment. Keep in mind that in 1948, the year the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was signed, the human population was about 2.4 billion. Today, it is about 8 billion, and projected to be 11 to 12 billion by the end of the century. At the same time, we have seen major decline in other species of life. Due to the massive deforestation, the depletion of underground water aquifers and topsoils, and the inundation of our atmosphere with man-made greenhouse gas pollution, primarily from the burning of fossil fuels. When development comes at the expense of nature, as it does all too often, it is also the poor and marginalized human beings who suffer the most. The UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights, Philip Alston, issued a detailed report in June 2019 clearly stating this, quote, "Climate change threatens to undo the last 50 years of progress in development, global health, and poverty reduction. it could push more than 120 million more people into poverty by 2030 and will have the most severe impact in poor countries, regions, and the places poor people live and work. End quote. Defending freedom and human rights means taking action on climate now. So, what can we do? Communities grounded in faith, values, and conscience have a critical role to play. The climate crisis is about more than data, science, and technology, as important as they are. It is about our values, our relationships to each other, and the very nature and meaning of existence. The calls to action that I want to make today are in that spirit. We need to reframe our mindset and our collective behavior about three things: time, place, and being. First, time. Climate change is clearly not something happening in the distant future. It is here now, and so must be our response. The timelines and dates we hear from companies and governments can be distracting and confusing. We must accelerate the transition to renewable energy. We must act now to defeat the wave of misinformation and confusion and greenwashing. We must break free from the system that runs on short-term monetary investments at the expense of the well-being of the whole community of life. Specifically, if you or your faith community or institution have money invested in the fossil fuel industry, move it now. Divest. We must simultaneously, in terms of time, think with a longer time frame in mind. We must widen our circle of moral concern to include future generations. As many Indigenous elders have taught, make every big decision today with 7 generations in the future in mind. I think back to my great-grandmother, who was born in 1899, who I knew well. That was just 6 years after the first Parliament of the World's Religions. And if I know my daughter's granddaughter, that will make that span complete. The work of those who were here at that first Parliament in 1893 is still unfolding. Today, let us unfold it further. Second, place. Reconnect to the ecosystem you live in. The water, the soil, the plants and animals and other beings. Honor the spirits of nature in whatever way your tradition affords you, through words, ritual, ceremony, thoughts, and action. Practice restoration of biocultural heritage as well as landscapes. The Center for Earth Ethics has worked with the United Religions Initiative on a guidebook for convening community conversations on ecosystem restoration, emphasizing the role of values, culture, and spirituality. We invite you to download it on our website and reach out to us to share your experience. Also, when it comes to place, be aware of those who suffer from environmental injustice in your region. Always those who are already suffering from some combination of poverty and racism, which we must also commit and work to eradicate. Remember, it is the same fossil fuel pollution that drives climate change that also harms it also has local ambient air pollution that harms the health and well-being of the people that live there. Caring about environmental justice is a form of self-care, and it is also climate action. This may lead to building alliances for many things, including to resist build-out of fossil fuel infrastructure, which we know is very important in this time, as David Hales reminded us right at the start. I witnessed this in Union Hill, Virginia, a few years back, when a pair of historic African-American Baptist churches in Buckingham County, Virginia, joined forces with the community of Yogaville to defend their land from a toxic methane compressor station. And under the leadership of Swami Dayananda, who I met at the Parliament of the World's Religions just some years back, I think it was Toronto, or was it Salt Lake City? Under the leadership of Swami Dayananda and Pastor Paul Wilson and others, and with the very real help of the prayers and songs and ritual and ceremony that consistently cultivated goodwill and fortified their spirits, This interfaith community prevailed in protecting their place, in defeating that toxic project, and they helped bring about the cancellation of the entire Atlantic Coast Pipeline in July 2020. And of course, this call to resistance and solidarity also applies to the petrochemical plastics factories that are part of the same industry's pattern of environmental and climate injustice and dehumanization of communities of people. We call for a strong global plastics treaty, and we also must work in each of our places to stop the madness of building out more production of single-use plastics that harm human and ecological health. As this crisis unfolds, and some call for false solutions like geoengineering the sky or other bets on new technologies to try to bend this biosphere to our will, remember, it is not the Earth that needs fixing, it is us. The human relationship to place can be a force for both climate mitigation, stopping the problem from getting worse, and climate adaptation, adjusting to the changes with justice, compassion, and wisdom. And many of us have much to learn from other cultures about what that looks and feels like in practice. As the Haudenosaunee Confederacy wrote in 1978 in a basic call to consciousness, quote, "The majority of the world finds its roots in the natural world, and it is the natural world and the traditions of the natural world that must prevail if we are to develop truly free and egalitarian societies." And this brings me to the final category, which is being. As we defend freedom and human rights, let us follow the example of those First Nations elders. Let us acknowledge our relations and relationships with other than human life and defend their freedom to be as well as our own. Let us celebrate, demonstrate, and communicate about the essential oneness of life. This is a truth that is expressed in the highest form of all the world's spiritual traditions in one way or another. And in some ways, the crisis of climate change is a revelation of that oneness. Burning fossil fuels in mid-latitudes of the planet contributes to ice melt at the poles, which causes sea level rise that drives people from low-lying coastal areas and inundates small island nations. Deforestation of the Amazon, which we heard about Wednesday night straight from those who live there, contributes to the heat domes and the rain bombs and the wildfires that have popped up all over the planet, causing so much suffering. We can change this pattern from extraction and combustion to care and love and regeneration, and we can transform our collective destiny. We live in this interconnection, and it does not need to be tragic. It can be a force for good. I think about the words of Howard Thurman, the longtime dean of Marsh Chapel at Boston University, a Baptist, a mystic, a deep thinker. He recalled the feeling he had as a child on the Atlantic coast of Florida. Quote, "I had the sense that all things, the sand, the sea, the stars, the night, and I, were one lung through which all life breathed. Not only was I aware of the vast rhythm enveloping all, but I was a part of it, and it was a part of me. The resulting synthesis seemed to me not just metaphysical, but religious." And so, as I close, let's take a moment to breathe, to consider not only those of us in this hall and those of us online, but that great lake outside, that life under the water, those birds in the sky, the forest in the Amazon, the ice at the poles. Let's consider how we bring these insights about time, place, and being into our communities and town halls and boardrooms and social circles in a way that is both practical and catalytic. As many faith leaders have taught us, freedom comes from much more from belonging within the community of life than from constantly trying to escape and take exception to it. The great Bengali poet and educator Rabindranath Tagore wrote, "Emancipation from the soil is no freedom for the tree." Interfaith dialogue is a powerful force for good in the world. Faith traditions are diverse, but we all share a sense that values run deeper than politics or price tags, that life has meaning, and that there is some form of higher power to which our actions are ultimately accountable. So in sum, let me end by thanking all of you. Thank you for having the courage of heart to take action on climate. And just by being here in Chicago or tuning in from afar, you are building momentum for the global change that must and will come in order to save and protect and cherish life within this beautiful earthly home that we share. Thank you.
We ask that you now direct your attention to the screen for a message composed as a special collaboration between the World Wildlife Fund, Netflix, and Silverback Films, in which Sir David Attenborough instructs us on how to save the planet.
How do we create a future in which both people and nature can thrive? This is the biggest question of our times. In the next few decades, we need to do something unprecedented, achieve a sustainable existence on Earth. But how do we do it? We can start by understanding how we got to this point. 20,000 years ago, humankind consisted of less than 1 million hunter-gatherers across the globe. We lived within the resources on offer, in balance with nature, a strategy that could theoretically last forever. But it wasn't an easy life. Nature determined our survival. We used our unique minds to challenge that reality. We learnt how to tame the wild, get more from the environment. Our population boomed, as did our demands. Every time a new problem arose, we solved it, altering Earth's entire surface in the process. And now we have changed the world so profoundly, scientists have decided that Earth has entered a new phase of its existence. Welcome to the Anthropocene, the age of humans. The tables have turned. We now determine nature's survival. The planet is ours. There's just one problem. We're now totally out of balance with nature. And unless we get our balance back, this age of humans is due to be short-lived. So how do we deal with this problem? When you boil it down, there is one underlying big issue. Our planet is becoming less wild. Our species has cleared 3 trillion trees, cultivated half its fertile land, and now fishes across most of the ocean. In the last 50 years, the populations of wild animals have reduced by 60%. We've replaced them with ourselves and our domesticated animals and plants. Today, we and the animals we raise account for 96% of the mass of mammals and 70% of the birds on Earth. there's very little wild left. This biodiversity loss is not just a tragedy, it's the single biggest problem we face. Without biodiversity, the world as we know it doesn't work. Our planet needs its wild spaces. Every one is a component in the global machine. Only if they are all healthy can the planet run smoothly. A less wild world is less able to provide for our needs, less able to maintain dependable weather and seasons, less able to absorb our impact. Biodiversity equals stability, and stability is what we need most of all. Can we turn this situation around? Can we rewild the world? Well, maybe, due to one key change. As societies develop, something is happening that has never happened before. People are having fewer children. Globally, since the year 2000, the number of people under 16 years old has hardly changed. The main reason our population is still rising is because people are living longer. If this continues, our population may finally stop growing by the turn of the century. By investing in education and women's rights and raising people out of poverty, we could bring about peak human even sooner. This changes everything. It gives us the opportunity we need to regain our balance. The plan for our planet is remarkably simple. Reduce our impact by making sure that everything we do, we can do forever. For the biggest gains, we could concentrate our efforts on 4 goals: phasing out fossil fuels and replacing them with renewables. This will not only slow the warming of the planet and the acidification of the ocean, but it will lead to clean air for all of us. Upgrading to efficient food production and reducing our consumption of meat. We'll require far less space to provide for ourselves, leaving more for grasslands, reducing deforestation and our demand for fresh water, and feeding more people with healthier, more affordable food. Working together to properly manage our ocean. A global network of no-fish zones and a treaty on the use of international waters would restore the health of the ocean so it actually produces more fish for us all to eat. Working hard to keep hold of the wild populations we still have, encouraging nature wherever we can. In the ocean, on land we no longer need, and even in our cities. If we make these changes, we'll be a long way to becoming a species in balance with nature once again. We will have taken a remarkable journey, from 1 million people struggling to survive, to several billion living long, healthy lives on a stable planet, able to provide for all our needs. Only at that point will the Anthropocene, the age of humans, be truly underway. At that point, we will be proud to call it our planet. How do we create a future in which both people and nature can thrive? We open our eyes to this moment in history. Think on a planetary scale. Embrace the challenge we face. And do something we humans are very good at. Change the world.
Our next esteemed guest will be joining us via video message. Sir Partha Dasgupta is a professor of economics at the University of Cambridge and fellow of St. John's College. He is a founding member of the Management and Advisory Committee of the South Asian Network for Development and Environmental Economics. He helped to establish the Journal of Development and Environment and Development Economics, published by Cambridge University Press, whose purpose has been not only to publish original research at the interface of poverty and the environmental resource base, but also to provide an opportunity to scholars in developing countries to publish their findings in an international journal. Please direct your attention to the screens for a special message from Sir Partha Dasgupta.
Good morning. It's an honor to be with you. Please accept my apologies for not being with you physically. And also the fact that I'm actually recording this in advance of the event for technical reasons. So I shan't be able to respond to any questions that you may have after I'm given my remarks. But please feel free to write to me should you wish to, and I'll get back to you on that. If you plot global GDP, world population, and global GDP per capita from year 1, CE that is, to the present, you will find each curve to be pretty flat until about 1750, then rising gently and taking a sharp turn upward from the immediate post-war years, 1950, for example. Global GDP has grown more than 15 times since 1950. World population has grown from some 2.5 billion to 8 billion today. Per capita global GDP has increased nearly fivefold to some $18,000 PPP annually. Life expectancy at birth has increased from 46 years to 72 years, and the proportion of people in extreme poverty has declined from some 60% to under 10%. Now, all this would be unadulterated good news, but for the fact that we have achieved those successes by mining Mother Nature to the point where there is an enormous global overreach into her goods and services. Crude estimates suggest that the ratio of our global demand for nature's goods and services and her ability to meet the demand on a sustainable basis is about 1.7, an almost certain underestimate, by the way. Whence the refrain that we need 1.7 Earths to support the current global standard of living. Extinction of species in the Anthropocene, that is the period since 1950, have been occurring at 100 to 1,000 times the background rate, which was approximately 0.1 to 1 species extinction per million species per year. These statistics are a rare example of a point of contact between economics and the earth sciences for prominent members of the latter see 1950 as the year we entered the Anthropocene, a phrase that you have come across in recent years. Now, in my review of the economics of biodiversity, which I submitted to the UK government about 2.5 years ago, I tried to blend ecology with economics in such a way that we could discuss economic possibilities in the future, into the future, in a way in which Mother Nature is embedded, or rather we are embedded in Mother Nature in a seamless way. And I want to make a few comments along that line. Now, in recent years, ecologists have drawn a distinction between Mother Nature's provisioning goods, food, water, timber, fuels, fibers, pharmaceuticals, and non-living materials, and her maintenance and regulating services, prominent among which are carbon sequestration, nitrogen fixation, nutrient recycling, decomposition of waste, pollination, soil regeneration, purification of water, and maintenance of the biosphere's gaseous composition. Now, the former, that is to say provisioning goods, consist of goods that, with human effort and ingenuity, are transformed into the final goods and services that are reflected in GDP. That's why we pay attention to provisioning goods. In contrast, maintenance and regulating services create provisioning goods. We are mostly unaware of the processes that give rise to those services. Think of the things that are happening deep in the soils, in the thickness of tropical rainforests, and in the ocean depths. But they are the foundation on which we exist. And because they're several steps removed from our direct experience, we underestimate their significance. The problem is, there are tensions between our demand for provisioning goods and our need for maintenance and regulating services. When we engage in mining, quarrying, and more broadly in the land use changes accompanying expansions of crop agriculture, animal farming, plantations, and construction, nature's ability to supply maintenance and regulating services is diminished. Over a third of Earth's land surface is currently used for crops and pasture. Most new cropland has replaced forests, and most new pasture land has replaced grasslands, savannas, and shrublands. In the process, much biodiversity has been lost. That has correspondingly weakened maintenance and regulating services, including Mother Nature's ability to regulate climate. It's the latter which we talk about mostly, but there are millions of other services that Mother Nature offers us, and we ignore them to our peril. There is a further distinction between Mother Nature's goods and services. Although technological advancements have repeatedly shown ways to substitute provisioning goods for one another, fossil fuels replacing timber, solar panels and wind farms substituting for fossil fuels in energy production, and so on, nature's maintenance and regulating services are complementary to one another. Disrupting one sufficiently disrupts the others. The mutual influence of climate change and destruction of the world's tropical rainforests is an example of this complementarity. Complementarities among the latter tell us that we are embedded in nature. We are not external creatures. Nature isn't, of course, a house of cards. She's resilient. But we humans are now so clever that we could convert her into one if we choose to do so, as I fear we are doing currently. Climate change is one example, of course, but this entire loss of biodiversity that I've just hinted at is an example of the other. Now, there are three features of nature's maintenance and regulating services, and that's what I'm concentrating on here because they're so badly neglected in our economic thinking. And these three features consist of one, that Mother Nature is mobile. She's always on the move, whether it's the wind, or whether it's ocean currents, or the flow of rivers, and of course, the movement of creatures, animals, insects, and so forth, which makes, of course, property rights very difficult to enforce. What we do here translates into the future effects, has consequences in the future and far away, perhaps. And you're familiar with that aspect of Mother Nature's characteristic, namely mobility. But there are two other features which I want to concentrate on now. One is many of these processes are silent and they're invisible. And I've suggested that they are when you think about deep in the oceans, what's going on there in the soils and so forth. And allied to this concentration of processes is the fact that we may think of Mother Nature as a bewildering array of rhythms of widely different periodicity and spatial extent. Think of the speed with which bacterial life transforms itself. Seconds. Compare that to an oak tree or the succession of forests, which we're looking at. Now we're looking at periodicity of hundreds of years. And then there are, of course, ocean currents, which take thousands of years to roll, okay? And it seems to me that it is the processes, Mother Nature's processes, the maintenance and regulating services on the basis of which all of life depends, is at the heart of much religious thinking. When I was in school in Varanasi, we had a daily assembly at which our music teacher and his students would chant, sing Vedic hymns. And they would be incantations to dawn dusk, birth and death, creation, and so forth. And so these hymns spoke to these rhythms, something that we are losing touch with because we are concentrating on provisioning goods, our needs for these goods, which are supplied by these processes. Invocation to these processes bring us in touch, at least bring me in touch with what I can only call the transcendent. Avoiding thinking about these processes as we tend to in the modern era has also shaped our sense of the aesthetics. We think of nature as orderly. Great art looks at still life, scenes, natural scenes from a distance, and they're always clean, at least in our sense of cleanliness. And in fact, we've evolved our sense, the sense of our aesthetic sense is evolved to think of nature as an orderly and neat object. And by nature, of course, I mean all the ecosystem, the mangrove forests, the coral reefs, the wetlands, the rainforests, and the grasslands, and so forth. But it seems to me when you concentrate on processes, then you begin to see that maybe our perception, our aesthetic perception is biased. In the autumn, when you go for a walk and you see rotting leaves, fungal growth on decaying timber, it's not beautiful in the conventional sense. But of course, if you think of them as processes, if you accept them as manifestation of processes, they have an unearthly beauty. The two features that I emphasized at the start, that Mother Nature's processes are often invisible and silent, makes life very difficult for us in the sense that we easily tarnish her. And the reason is that silence and invisibility and spatial range of events makes it very difficult to monitor our own behavior. Others can't see what we are doing. And so the law or social norms of behavior are not very effective. They're not effective because for norms to function, people need to know what you have done, and then you can be told off, if you like. And of course, the law can't operate unless there's ways of verifying what a miscreant has done. Which is why in my review, I ended by recognizing that there is just so much we can do to alleviate the problems that we have created for ourselves by relying on the law or even social norms of behavior, because monitoring is so difficult. So what does one do? It seemed to me, and that's where the review ends, we need to be our own judge and jury. And it's self-monitoring that can keep us from spoiling nature, insulting her to the extent that we do, sometimes even without knowing. How do you generate that? It seemed to me that the only way to do that is if we develop a love for nature, and love for the processes that describe nature. How do you create that love? Again, it seemed to me it will be education. That is, if from the earliest stages of our lives, we are trained to be naturalists, so nature studies, join forces with reading, writing, and arithmetic as the basic educational topics. Then when children from the earliest years, particularly now that we are becoming an urbanized society, muck around in nature, dig up a bit of soil to see what's going on, getting an understanding of these bewilderingly fascinating processes will generate a reverence for this incredible world we have been born into. Thank you very much.
Please welcome Ragi Jata, religious musicians from India.
Hello. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. When we meet each other, everyone has different way to treating and saying hello. However, we Sikhs meet to saying Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh, Sat Sri Akal. And these are those instruments on which our spiritual masters have used to do kirtan in their time, last just 550 years ago. And the founder of our Sikh faith, first spiritual master, Guru Nanak Dev Ji, 553 years ago, wrote these hymns as part of first prayer of Sikhs, Japji Sahib, connecting the nature elements to spiritual journey. Almighty is inside us as well as in His creation, so let's enjoy it. Thank you so much. Vaheguru Pavan Guru Pani Pita Pavan Guru Pani Pita Pavan Guru Pani Pita Mata Tarat Mahat Mata Tarat Pavan Guru
जिन्नी नाम ते आया जिन्नी नाम ते आया जिन्नी नाम ते आया जिन्नी नाम ते आया गए मशक्कत कार नानक देव करो जले नानक देव को जले नानक देव नानक देव पे उजले नानक देव पे उजले नानक देव पे उजले कहती छुट्टी नाल कहती छुट्टी नाल कहती छुट्टी नाल कहती छुट्टी नाल पवन गुरु पानी पिता पवन गुरु पानी पिता माता दर्द महात माता दर्द महात पवन गुरु पानी पिता पवन गुरु पानी पिता पवन गुरु पानी पिता
So let us pledge to care, conserve environment to sustain life on the planet, protect natural habitats within your local area, and enhance our journey on spiritual goals. Thank you so much. Vaheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji ki Fateh. Bole Sonia.
Sri Akal
Our next esteemed guest is Brother Benedict Ayodi, a Capuchin Franciscan friar, the Outreach Officer for Franciscans International, and the Programs Coordinator for Africa for the Laudato Si movement. Working between New York and Kenya, Brother Ben is a member of the Justice, Peace, and Integrity Creation Working Group, focusing on climate safety and justice for future generations. Please welcome Brother Benedict Ayodi.
Good morning and jambo, hakuna matata, and so humble to be here today and to stand before you at this Parliament of World Religions. I'd like to start with a story. In Lampedusa, a small island on the Mediterranean in the province of Sicily in Italy, I happened to meet a young man by the name of Mose, who had just arrived by boat from Eritrea in East Africa. As part of my pastoral service as a Franciscan, I had a mission of receiving and giving spiritual counseling and comfort to traumatized refugees arriving on boats from Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. Mose happened to tell me of his harrowing experience on the sea. At around 2 a.m., In the early morning hours, the overcrowded fishing boat drifted less than half a mile off of Lampedusa. For the estimated 300 people packed on board, the twinkling lights of the island signified the end of a long and difficult journey. Each had paid 1,500 US dollars to the smugglers to make the crossing. With the land in sight, they steered and began excitedly to prepare for their arrival in Europe. For them, freedom was here at last. They hoped it would be the end of their suffering. No more drought and famine, no more oppression and lack of human rights, no more conflict and war. They sang freedom at last. After 36 hours on the sea with the noise of the diesel engine, there was sudden silence. The only sound was the slap of waves against the old wooden boat. The captains of migrant vessels such as these often cut the engine within sight of land and wait for the Coast Guard to tow them on shore. This allows the crew to disappear into the crowd and avoid arrest for people smuggling. Below deck, it was crowded and hot, with too many seasick passengers crammed into the confined space, including women and children. But fate was not on their side. The engine of the boat had stalled, now drifting with engine off. The boat's pump was no longer active, and seawater began to pour in. Tragedy indeed befell them. More than 250 people drowned that day. A few survived to tell the story, including this young man I was meeting, Mose from Eritrea. This is just one story of climate-induced migration in the Horn of Africa. The continent has contributed less than 4% to the total greenhouse gas emission, but has already suffered serious consequences from biodiversity loss to reduced food production. This, as you know, is in the backdrop of an economy emerging from the ravages of COVID-19 and effects of historical development deficit in many global South countries. Vanessa Nakate, a climate activist from Uganda, once said, "Climate change is more than statistics. It's more than data points. It's more than net zero targets. It's about people. It's about the people who are being impacted right now, the vulnerable, the people living on the margins." Addressing the climate crisis is about more than just stopping new fossil fuel extractions, reducing pollution, and mitigating the impacts that global economics and energy systems have on the climate. But it must also be about protecting basic human rights through climate adaptation. Making connections between human rights and a harmonious, healthy planet is possible when one begins to understand the impacts of climate change and the ways in which those impacts affect us, our families, and the communities, and the future generation. Going back to the sad story of Mose, I wondered what I will say to him. Will prayer help? Will giving him food and shelter console him? How could he and many others find healing and consolation? I remember the words of Prophet Micah from the Bible. "This is what I require of you, that you do justice, and you love kindly, and you walk humbly with your God." in the current situation. We may be living through times of unprecedented change, but in certainty lies the power to influence the future. Now is not the time to despair, but to act. The time to act. St. Francis of Assisi would humbly proclaim, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Franciscans International participated in a broad civil society coalition that advocated for recognizing the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment by the United Nations General Assembly. The question, thank you. The question before us as people of faith and working in the margins of society is how we translate this resolution into societal transformation. Given our moral and spiritual charism and the large network we have in the grassroots, we not only influence national policies through our local initiatives, but also promote and enhance healthy and sustainable living. We are driven towards this work as long before the current climate crisis. St. Francis of Assisi wrote Laudato Si, praise to you. This was the concept of common creaturehood under one God. We therefore view the environment as a common good, belonging to all and meant for all. The urgent challenge to protect our common home, says Pope Francis in the encyclical Laudato Si, includes a concern to bring a whole human family together to seek sustainable and integral development. This is true through such organizations as the Laudato Si movement and many others that are advocating against the EACOP, the East African Oil Pipeline, that is to move from Uganda to Tanzania. Indeed, at this time of worldwide transformation and considering the example of St. Francis, we are all challenged to reflect on our lifestyle, personal, communal, and socio-political, and deepen our commitment to living solidarity with those who are most impoverished of humanity and of all the rest of creation. This is a call for courage and unity, where every woman and man has opportunity and skills to contribute, especially the most marginalized, where sustainability means much more than green laws and policies. It means new ways of thinking and behaving as global citizens. We must use such opportunities as the Parliament of World's Religion to dialogue and discover the essence of our humanity. Saint Mother Teresa once said, if we have no peace, it is because we have forgotten that we belong to each other. In our African Ubuntu philosophy, we say, I am because we are, and since we are, therefore I am. So what makes me human is all of us. During his last days on earth, St. Francis of Assisi said, I have done what is mine. May Christ teach you what is yours. We can only change the world in so much far we can change ourselves. We can only give away who we are. We can only offer to others what God has done in us. Thank you very much. Pace bene.
Sending a letter as a reminder to all our leaders. Yeah, we ask you to honor Paris Agreement. You ratified some years ago. Our citizens and the children are striking because of you. Agenda 2030, still like a dream. We're losing our right because of you guys.
Look at the way the temperature is very high. Everyone will want to have an environment that is very friendly, an environment that is free of pollution.
Vuka Africa, vuka. Vuka Corsico. Vuka Africa, vuka. Fossil fuels is bad. Vuka Africa, vuka. Vuka Corsico. Vuka Africa, vuka. 'Cause fossil fuel kills.
Why? Cutting down the trees, causing more pollution and then lung infection. People are dying and okay, I'm crying. So we have to try to keep environment high sanitation, and then stop corruption. We make a better future for the next generation. We need participation, not isolation. Involve our leaders for a better contribution. We have the right to live Africa, vuka to the world. Serikali kuna shida, munakuza tu mazingira, munasahau tupate maji angalau.
I am the king, of course in my palace nobody can be like me. I'm a champion every day, I got the message. I really need your sense in the moment of silence. Togetherness, let's strike for the change. Africa, vuka to the world. Uwezi leta drought in my hood. My mother linipenda na tena kunitunza binadamu, kata miti. Maisha ikawa gumu every time, every day. Watu wanalia bala njaa limewatikisa. I never knew cheki limewaka kama moto. Hey, habari munapata kama ndoto. Walai bilai, mazingira nilokuwa kushinda ndoto. Isaligrad all the way from Rubembe.
We declare climate emergency. We ask you to divert from fossil fuel and invest in renewable energy.
Vuka Africa, vuka. Vuka Corsico. Vuka Africa, vuka. Fossil fuels is bad. Vuka Africa, vuka. Vuka Corsico. Vuka Africa, vuka. 'Cause fossil fuels kills.
Climate justice is all that we need. Climate justice is all that we need. Stop coal business, fossil business. Climate justice is all that we need. Killing innocent people with greediness and selfishness, and climate justice is all that we need.
Africa, Africa.
Do it for us and the next generation, yeah.
Africa fossil free.
Africa, vuka.
Vuka Corsico. Vuka Africa, vuka. Fossil fuels is bad. Vuka Africa, vuka. Vuka Corsico. Vuka Africa, vuka. 'Cause fossil fuels
Here today to introduce us to a crucial initiative for climate justice is Reverend Abby Mohaupt. Abby is Director of Education and Training for Green Faith, holds Masters of Divinity and of Theology from McCormick Theological Seminary, is a PhD candidate at Drew Theological School, and an incredible friend. Please welcome Reverend Abby Mohaupt to introduce the Fossil Fuels Non-Proliferation Treaty.
Thank you.
Friends, we know that fossil fuels are the primary cause of the climate crisis. They account for 86% of CO2 emissions in just the past decade. They are a threat to global economy, health, peace, and climate security. The IPCC Sixth Assessment Report explicitly notes that the world is set to reach the 1.5 degrees Celsius level within the next 2 decades and attests that only the most drastic cuts in carbon emissions from now on would help prevent an even greater environmental disaster. Scientists have been warning for decades about the catastrophic results on the climate if the world reaches average temperatures above 1.5 Celsius. And yet governments are ignoring the science and they keep expanding and funding the problem. Emissions from fossil fuels keep rising. But stopping new projects alone isn't enough. We must phase out existing production. Even if no new fossil fuels, if no new projects were built from today onward, emissions from existing coal, oil, and gas infrastructure alone will blow the carbon budget by more than 130%. And so that is why we are calling for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, which would complement the Paris Agreement, which does not mention oil, gas, and coal. It would complement it by tackling the biggest contributor to climate change. A treaty would also significantly strengthen global cooperation on the climate emergency. The treaty calls for 3 things. First, a just energy transition, which would support and sufficiently finance a global shift to renewable energy where no worker, community, or country is left behind. Second, it calls for non-proliferation or stopping the expansion of any new coal, oil, or gas. And 3, it calls for a fair phase-out of existing production in line with 1.5 Celsius per the climate agreement in Paris. People of faith all over the world have endorsed this treaty as a faithful response to the crisis at hand. We hail from many faiths and beliefs, but together we can remedy the decades of negligence and unfaithfulness to safeguard our coexistence with this earth and each other. And just as our beliefs are entrenched in religious and spiritual teachings, our response to the climate crisis must be deeply rooted in science and equity to heal the planet and people alike. So sign the letter, the faith letter in support of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty today. And in just a moment, there'll be a slide up with the QR code. Thank you.
The generation that grew up with nuclear weapons were told to hide under their desks in case of attack. This generation faces an even greater threat, the climate crisis. And again, they have nowhere to hide. While citizens, cities, and countries are working to reduce their emissions, behind our backs, the coal, oil, and gas industry continues to rapidly expand fossil fuels, driving catastrophic warming. Surviving the climate crisis requires a bold new idea. Introducing the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. Why a treaty? 50 years ago, the world signed a non-proliferation treaty to avoid nuclear war. In 1987, the Montreal Protocol protected the ozone. The Paris Agreement begins to limit emissions, but doesn't mention coal, oil, or gas. We need a global plan to end the proliferation of fossil fuels and fast-track solutions. A fossil fuel treaty would phase out coal, oil, and gas faster, more fairly, and forever, while supporting workers, communities, and countries dependent on fossil fuels. People around the world are already winning frontline battles against coal, oil, and gas projects. A treaty can bring together these diverse efforts into a powerful and equitable global plan. Endorse the Fossil Fuel Treaty, and together we can drive a just transition to clean energy and a safe climate for generations to come.
Hello again, everyone. As you know, my name is Emily. I am 23 years old, and I have never experienced what it's like to live on a healthy planet. Not once in my lifetime has there been a point where our climate was not in crisis. Since I was born, the global temperature has risen 0.6 of a degree. We have added over 1.5 billion people to the population. Sea levels have risen by over 3 inches. Extreme weather in the US has increased by 30%, and we have lost over 15 trillion tons of ice. When I was 5, they talked about the hole in the ozone layer and told my class that when we grew up, we would be the ones that would find the solution. When I was 8, it was global warming, and they told me that my generation would be the one to solve it. When I was 15, they told us about the island of trash in the Pacific Ocean and said that I would find a way to clean it up. My peers and I have been told time and time again that our generation is the best and the brightest, that we will fix what those before us broke, that when we grew up, it would be our responsibility to solve the climate crisis. But to put that in perspective, there are 7.8 billion people on Earth, and only 1.8 billion of them are between the ages of 10 and 24. So where does that leave the other 6 billion people? No one is off the hook. There is no time. There is no time for procrastination. There's no room for evading responsibility or for passing the buck. Every single one of us is needed. Every one of us, no matter our age, no matter who we are, can and must make a change if we want to stand a chance of saving our Earth. As Jane Goodall put it, every individual matters. Every individual has a role to play. Every individual makes a difference. It starts with each person, right where we are, right when we are, making a definitive and conscious choice to act differently. No one can do all that must be done, but everyone can do something. Accomplishing what is necessary starts with each of us doing what we can. It will be uncomfortable, it will not be easy, but I can promise you it will be worth it. It starts with a single person. It starts with you, making a change in how you live. Then we ask you to share those changes with the people you love. Take it back to your community, your faith group, your congregation, your family, and your friends. But at the same time, we recognize that not everyone has the privilege to make those kinds of changes. Not many people own their own home and can control if the building uses solar power. Not everyone has easy access to a grocery store to buy local produce. In Chicago alone, there are 500,000 people that live in a food desert. So we ask you to consider the system that we live in, a system that does not prioritize the health of our planet. And we ask you to consider how your voice can change the way your country behaves. We are the first generation of humans to have the knowledge, technology, and wealth to create societies that are sustainable and just. With that opportunity comes responsibility. Each of us has the responsibility to do what is right. But where do you start? You start by reflecting on your life and the changes and choices that you make every day. What do you spend money on daily? What sort of trash do you throw away? How much plastic, how many single-use products are you using? It's looking at your life through a new lens and evaluating your habits through their impact on the earth. Are you wasting energy by leaving lights on? Are you taking public transit? Are you eating local foods? Are you leaving lights on and running water and leaving appliances plugged in? That's why we ask you to reflect on your personal, individual choices and make a change. But we cannot and we must not stop there. Because no matter how much we do as individuals, it isn't enough. Because just 100 fossil fuel companies are responsible for 71% of global emissions. And so we ask that you endorse the Fossil Fuels Non-Proliferation Treaty, as Reverend Abby Mohaupt just shared. The burning of coal, oil, and gas is responsible for 86% of carbon emissions in the past decade. With these emissions also come the costs of local pollution, environmental degradation, and health impacts associated with extracting, refining, transporting, and burning fossil fuels. It's time for that to end. You can endorse this as an individual, as an organization, as a faith group, and even as a city. Then we ask you to consider the problem with plastics. Half of all plastics ever manufactured have been made in the last 15 years. We produced 448 million tons of plastic in 2015 alone, and we're projected to double that annual production by 2050. About 8 million tons of that escapes into our oceans every year. There's an island of trash in the ocean called the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, composed of 1.8 trillion pieces of plastic, which is equivalent to 250 pieces of plastic for every human on the world. So we ask that you endorse the treaty to end plastics, which calls upon members of the United Nations to create a legally binding global instrument on plastic pollution, including measures along the entire life cycle of plastics, its production, transport, use, and disposal. But our climate crisis is trifold: pollution, climate change, and biodiversity loss. The Living Planet Index, created by the World Wildlife Fund, estimates that since 1970, we have seen an average 69% decrease in monitored wildlife populations. More than 41,000 animal species worldwide are threatened with extinction, including 41% of all amphibians, almost 33% of reef-forming corals, 27% of the world's mammals, and 13% of all known bird species. So we ask that you read and endorse the statement made by the Faiths for Biodiversity Coalition and see how you can join the movement to protect 30% of the earth, land, and ocean by the year 2030. Then we ask you to consider the future. What are we leaving to the coming generations? The Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, has proposed repurposing an institution of the UN to safeguard the future of the coming generations by saving our planet and providing a path for stewardship of the global commons. So we ask that you learn more about the proposal and consider supporting the call. And lastly, we call on you to support the human right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, recognized by the United Nations as a universal human right last July. This is a monumental step forward, but the work in getting this right realized in legal systems across the world begins now. We cannot just say that we're changing and will be better moving forward. We have to fix the damage that we've already caused. We must center this conversation on loss and damage and human rights and reparations. We must center this conversation on climate justice and a just transition for those communities that have had the least impact and yet bear the worst scars of climate change. We've put all of these items in one central place where you can find all the links to endorse the statements and learn more and take action. All you need to do is scan this code. It's as simple as this. If we have the ability to change, we have the responsibility to change. As diverse as our cultures and faith traditions may be, it is certain that we share the planet, and it is certain that we will share the future.
Have you enjoyed this plenary? And the one the other night? And the Amazon Assembly? This is our hero. A curtain call for Emily. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Yes. Reverend Gerald Durley is a pioneer of the civil rights movement. He is also a pioneer of the climate movement. And he would tell you, and may, in just a moment, tell you that they're the same movement. He has been a pastor for 25 years. He has been a leader for almost as long as I've been alive. That's a long time. He and Jesse Jackson started at the age of 18 their civil rights careers on the same day and were together. There's one more thing that Reverend Durley is, which we need even more than we need pastors. Gerald Durley is a prophet. Please welcome the Reverend Gerald Durley.
Hello. Oh, I can't hear you. Hello. I'm excited about being here today. This is the day that God has made. There are no accidents that I'm here and that you're there. I'm honored to be joined with my co-warriors, co-laborers, and co-conspirators who have been summoned here by God. This is no accident that Chicago has been selected as the city where we come together and shake each other and grab each other and hold on to one another to know that this is our time, this is our moment. This is the day that we must come together across all faiths and make a difference on our climate and help the environment to grow. I think about the world. The earth now is convulsing with hurricanes and tornadoes and wildfires, floods, droughts, food deserts, earthquakes, polluted water, plant life devastation. But I think the worst thing that's happening in America today is the climate insensitivity and ignorance that is produced by human beings who refuse to deny that climate change is real. I didn't come here today to be a harbinger of doom, a naysayer about what we're not doing. I did not come here to point fingers to the people who are destroying our earthly homes and our environment and our inhabitants. I stopped by briefly to say that we are no longer talking about climate change because we can see that the climate has already changed. We now must get excited about what it is that we do. The UN General Secretary said that we're not in climate change, but global warming. All of us have attended environmental meetings, conferences, seminars, international treaties all over the world. The world politicians are here today. The leaders are here today. The business leaders are here, and all of them are fully aware of the impending destruction of the planet. Yet it seems that everyone is fixed on profits over people and the progressive of what we're doing to each other. Given the world, climate, and reality of our time, it is now imperative than ever before that the interfaith community, that we unite as one collaborative, challenge, cohesive, coordinating, charging voice to do what compelled us in the civil rights movement to do, the thing that kept us going when no one paid us any attention, when they said you'll never get the right to vote, when they said you'll never have the right to work where you can when you want to work, even though you had enough education. Dr. King would look at all of us and understand that there are two things that make a movement. We have to say one thing: this is not a climate campaign. This is not an environmental campaign. This is a movement. Campaigns have a way to end, but we're not going to end. We're going to keep on marching, and we're going to keep on standing up, and we're going to keep on talking. This is not a campaign. So Dr. King would always ask one question when we wanted to give up, when we wanted to quit. He said, what are you willing to sacrifice, and what are you willing to risk? If you're not willing to sacrifice and not willing to risk, all you're going to do is keep coming to conferences and talking about it. When you leave here, somebody ought to be excited enough to tell somebody that I was at a mountaintop experience at the McCormick Place, and I need to talk to you about how do I take what I've learned, how do I bring it home, and how do we improve the planet and sustain the effort. Somebody ought to be happy about that and know what you're going to do when you leave here. It's not just another movement. It's not just another talk. I know that we have the knowledge, the capabilities, and we have the skills and general know-how to do something with this global runaway train. But I must be honest today, at the expense of appearing to be somewhat negative, I must say that the survey of the landscape now, collectively, we do not seem to have the willpower to stand up for justice and sacrifice. We would prefer to have a profitable bottom line and comfortable lifestyles. This is my 63rd year in the movement for civil rights, for human rights, for justice, for equality, for equity, for inclusion, and saving the planet now has moved up to the top. I believe that it is absolutely essential that the climate movement and the civil rights and human rights movement become one coordinated effort. Because when we fought, I never thought when I got to Nashville, Tennessee in 1960, and the man told me to go to the back of the bus. How could he tell me to go to the back of the bus? I was an All-American basketball player in Denver, Colorado. My name was the Double D, the double defensive, delectable, darling, dynamic, dangerous, devastating D from Denver. Who are you going to tell me to go to the back of the bus? But the laws were in place, so we fought to change the laws because our constitutional right said we had the right to vote, the right to work where we wanted to write, where we wanted to go. And I believe in the climate movement, we have the right to clean air. We have the right to clean water. We have the right to an ocean that's plastic-free. We have a right. Therefore, the constitutional rights of the movement and the civil rights and the human rights and the environmental rights must come together. Dr. King said when we got disappointed, when we wanted to quit, when we wanted to turn around, when we thought there was no sensitivity to our cause for justice, he would say this, and I quote, "We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. Our lives begin to end the day that we become silent about the things that matter. I'm convinced now that nothing in all of the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. Today we are called deliberately to come together to be more important about action. All of the great religions talk about how do we come together. When I think about the Jewish tradition, it says this: when God created the first human being, God led them around all the trees of the Garden of Eden and said, "See my works, how lovely they are, how fine they are. Take care not to corrupt and destroy my world." When I look at the native spirituality, it says, "Oh, great spirit, help us learn the lessons you have hidden in every rock." When I look at Shinduism, return the things given to the human as a gift of nature to the original place. Taoism, in harmony with the Tao, the sky is clear and spacious, the world and the earth is solid and full of all creatures that flourish together. All faiths talk about this. As we leave this world parliament, we must realize that environmental justice is broader than environmental equity, which means when you talk about equity, equal treatment and protection under many statutes and regulations, practices, emphasizing the right to a safe and healthy environment for all people, and incorporating physical, social, political, and economic justice under the heading of the environment. We must stand up and speak out against anybody that speaks about discrimination, policymaking, enforcement of laws that target communities of color for disposal sites and polluting industries, municipal landfills, speak out against them, hazardous waste facilities, nuclear waste dumps, manufacturing and sale of hazardous products, international distribution of toxic waste. We've got to speak out against those things that we begin to say that we're all in this together. People of faith, this is our time, this is our moment. We've been charged to speak out for the least, the lost, the left behind, those that don't know, those that are in hovels. You and I, our role is not to just come to a conference, but to leave here with the idea that we will go back and make a difference. All of those who agree with me ought to say there ought to be some excitement. I stopped coming to conferences like this. I stopped because I would come and everybody would talk and we would talk and we'd go back and it kept getting worse. Some type of way we've got to be that catalytic force that will make a difference on global boiling at this time. This movement, not this campaign, is now considered very important in the civil and the human rights movement. It is our time, it is our turn to make a difference. I feel I can put this in perspective. When I go back and think about in our tradition, so many times they would talk about in the African American community, are you all really concerned about the environment? You pollute the least, but you suffer the most. And a lot of times when I'm getting up trying to involve people, trying to get people involved, I have to go back to an old ancient story. And I think we can learn something from the writings of antiquity. There was a story written, even though this is all interfaith and world religions, I'll take my little moment from the book of Nehemiah in the Old Testament. When you think about Nehemiah, he was very much like those of you who I'm looking at today. Here was a young man who had risen to the top in his hometown. He was considered a very bright and brilliant person. He had gone to the greatest of universities, and everybody knew him, but his town was captured by an empire, and he was brought to that place, and he worked for the king, and he began to grow up under the king of another society. And you know, when you get in another society and you start making a little money and you got a new car, a new chariot, you think you're somebody. But whenever you get too high for your people, one of his friends came by and said, wait a minute, come here, let me talk to you just for a minute. Do you know what's happening back at home? He said, no, I'm working for the king. He said, everything has been torn down. The educational system is torn down. The political system is corrupt. The health system has gone astray, and the faith system has faded. You've got to come home and make a difference. When you leave this mountaintop experience, you've got to go back to your place and make a difference. You've got to be convicted on the inside so you'll be converted on the outside to make a conversation to whoever's standing next to you. This is the time, and it's our time. And as the story would go, he went back to his hometown, as you will go back to your hometown or your organization. And he raised the question, what am I willing to sacrifice and what am I willing to risk? And he started working. He started building a wall and bringing back up the environment in that area. He started talking about how are we going to change the water flow? How are we going to look at clean air? How are we going to look at toxic waste dumps in the area? And he began to work. But you know what? Whenever you start doing a good work, expect somebody to challenge you. Expect an enemy to come in. In this case, they came in from every side. So he had to pull his people together. And in this particular text, here's the word I want you to remember when you go home. It said, he became successful because of one thing. The people had a mind to work. The people had a mind to work. Do we have a mind to work when we leave a gathering of this nature? Do we have a mind to work? Do we have a mind to grow? Do we have a mind to increase? When the people have a mind to work, we will not be defeated. But they started working, and he had bricklayers around him. He had architects around him. He had those that carried the water. He had the cooks around him. And the warriors would protect them so they could work. But listen at this, and this is what I want you to see, because this is who you are, who I'm speaking with today. The people that he kept closest to him were the trumpet blowers. Now, why would he keep the trumpet blowers close to him? He said, no, I've got the warriors, but I need the trumpet blowers to stay next to me. They said, well, why would you have, what about the cooks and the water? He said, I need the trumpet blowers next to me. So today I'm saying that you are the trumpet blowers of the modern day movement. You are those that will help us to rebuild the wall and stabilize the society and the community and the environment. We are the modern day trumpet blowers here at this parliament. We must blow our trumpet against corporations who continue to pollute the environment to make a profit. We must blow our trumpet against politicians who are more concerned about power rather than people. We must blow our trumpet against scientists who refuse to speak up of fear for losing their job. We must blow our trumpet for the unethical rights and moral decisions that are being made. We must blow our trumpet for environmental justice. We must blow our trumpet for environmental equity. Do you have a trumpet out there? We must blow our trumpet. Are you ready? Can I find a few trumpet blowers? As you leave this place, grab your trumpet. Get all the information that you have. Tune your trumpet up. Put a new mouthpiece in. We need to blow our trumpet. We will not be bought. We will not bow. We will not back up. We will not bend, nor will we break. But we will blow our trumpet. Blow your trumpet. Scan the code and blow your trumpet. Can I get some trumpet blowers? How many trumpet blowers do I have in here who are ready to go back? If you're a trumpet blower, stand on your feet. Stand up. Stand up, trumpet blowers. You stand up. Look, enemy, these are the real trumpet blowers right here. Go and blow your trumpet. Thank you. Blow your trumpet.
Please welcome back from the Tukano Indigenous Nation of the Amazon, representative of the Indigenous Ayahuasca Conference, Daiara Tukano.
I didn't bring my trumpet, but I have this beautiful instrument that comes from the forest. And we say this is the sound of the voice of the waters, of the rivers, of the heart of our grandmother, our mother, of our own heart. And I would like to thank all the prayers, all the words of wisdom that representatives from all over the world have come to share in this beautiful space. The song, we sing it in the middle of the ceremony when the energy is high, to reunite all this message and send it to the Great Spirit, send it to the water, sending to the forest, sending to the wind, so it can spread and reach the heart of every living being that exists in our world. Kapi Hari Patire Umiko Hari Patire Mari Duvaya Wayamari No Mari Duvaya Wayamari Yepa Yepa Wayamari Kaga Anyu, thank you, grandfather, grandmother of the universe, for having this beautiful opportunity of life and being here together, sharing the message of the beauty, the love of life. As the best ancestors we can be today, walking and praying for the future generations, honoring all the generations of the past, every nation, in every song and every language, to honor the beauty of your creation, life, and nature. Anyu, thank you.
Thank you for coming to the Climate Action Assembly. We hope you'll return at 1:45 for Friends Across Faiths and Tributes to Ukraine, and 3 p.m. for the closing plenary.